Are you struggling with taking the plunge and buying your very first rental? I completely understand where you're coming from, and today I'm going to be talking about my very first rental, the struggles that I had at the very beginning, all the way up until today and how it performs. So let's get moving. Welcome back. So I know you're ready to get started. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about not only how I found the deal, I'm going to be talking about how I analyzed it, how I funded the deal, what have been my repairs since I purchased the deal. Also, I'm going to be talking about the monthly numbers. I'm going to break that down. And I'm also going to talk about the mistakes. So in number one is, how did I find this deal? Well, in reality, I spent weeks and months ahead of time researching. I read books. I went to local meetups. I also joined biggerpockets.com. I imagine that most of you are like me, and the reason it took me so long to get into my first property was because I would look at something and I just wasn't sure if it was the right deal. I was looking at it and I was stuck in analysis paralysis. You don't make any move because you feel like it's going to be the wrong move. Well, in reality, it's way easier than what's going on in your head. So on this one, this was actually my very first deal was from a wholesaler. And that wholesaler sold it to me a little bit above what he had it under contract for. I also had a realtor that he knew join in on the process, and he helped represent me on my side. But that's how I found my first deal. I networked with a wholesaler that helped find me a good deal. It wasn't the best deal. It definitely wasn't the worst deal. And even today, it's one of my better performing properties, actually. Okay, so we found the deal. Now I need to analyze it to determine if that was the property that I wanted to get. Well, I first needed to know the number one most important thing is, what was the purchase price? Well, the wholesaler had it under contract for $48,000. On top of that, we needed to add in the closing cost, the wholesaler fee, which was $1,500, and the property needed a roof right from the get-go. I figured that into my calculations. If I add everything in on top of that $48,000, it was $53,000 and some change. Well, so now I had that. I needed to know what it would rent for. Well, this was very easy for me because the previous owner was the landlord himself, and this was rented to a couple that had been in there for a few years and was renting it for $725. Now, at the very beginning, I was just using very simple calculations that I found on biggerpockets.com and read a few books, but that is using the 1% and 2% rules. Well, if I would have bought this house for $72,500, then rent each and every month of $725 is 1% of that purchase price. A lot of people like to go higher than 1%. They even like to shoot for the 2% or higher. And when you get up to those numbers, you're getting more return on that initial purchase of the property. On this one, it was actually a 1.36% with the $725 and the $53,000 purchase price, which has really served me well for this property. But on top of being able to rent it just for this amount, I wanted multiple exit strategies, which is an important thing for you to do as an investor, is figure out if something goes wrong with this one way that I purchased it, can I do something else and at least recoup my money without a huge loss? Well, on this property, I wanted to be able to sell it, and it appraised for around $75,000. I couldn't find the appraisal back from several years ago when I bought this, but it was about $75,000, and I purchased this property for just a smidge over 70% of the purchase price. I felt pretty confident in buying at that purchase that if I did not like this property as a rental, that I could just sell it and not only just break even, but make some money in doing so. So I was ready to move forward at that point, and I felt confident with the analysis that I did with the property. So now I knew I wanted the property, but how was I going to finance it? How was I going to purchase this property? Well, purchasing it, number one, I didn't want to own it in my own name, so I started a limited liability company to purchase this property in. It's really easy to do, so don't feel overwhelmed by it. If you have questions, comment below. I'd be glad to point you in the right direction. So I have this limited liability company, and I wanted to maximize my returns with my money, so I wanted to use leverage. And what that means is I only use a portion of my money to buy it, and then I borrow the money, and in this case, I used a small local bank. I recommend small local banks because they're just easier to work with. You're an actual person rather than a number to them. So I recommend just interviewing, going to talk to a few different ones. And because I own this property in a limited liability company, I needed a commercial loan. And on this commercial loan, I ended up having to put 25% down, which is $13,357.50. So that's what my initial financial investment was in this property, and that included getting the roof replaced. So we have the property financed. Now let's talk about the repairs that I've had to do because I closed and I'm a landlord at this point. Well, number one, we already talked about the roof, and I'm not going to put that into my calculations because that was in my purchase price. That's not a separate charge. So after that, my next biggest expense was that this place was heated by a boiler system, and the boiler system ended up going bad about a year into the property, maybe a little bit sooner than that, but it ended up needed to be replaced with either a new boiler or an actual gas force furnace. So I had the furnace put in there. A little bit later, I had issue with the install of that furnace where the drain pipe for the furnace was routed incorrectly outside, and when it got really cold, it would freeze. Well, a couple weeks ago, it was negative 50 degrees here. So we ran into those issues. When the boiler went bad, it actually had leaked some water and ruined a section of the flooring that had just been done right before I purchased the property. So I had to fix that, which wasn't a huge expense. I also had an issue with the kitchen water inlet. It was routed incorrectly when they built the house. It's way too close to the outside wall. What would happen? Same thing. When it would get really cold with the cabinets closed, those pipes would freeze up. Last thing I want to talk about is the dreaded toilet issue. Everyone thinks that they're going to get inundated with my toilet's clogged, my toilet's clogged. In this house, this is the only toilet issue I ever had, and it was simply a seal that went bad between the tank and the toilet. Simple, easy fix. That wraps up all the repairs I had to do with this, and it was a total of $2,900 from when I purchased it up until now, excluding the roof. That wasn't that bad, was it? You would probably think it was a lot more, but it really isn't. So now we want to talk about where the rubber hits the road. Let's talk about the financials. What financial benefit do I get, could you get in a rental property? Well, in this property, we started off with $725 every single month. And now let's talk about all the expenses. First and foremost, taxes, insurance. I don't recommend you not doing insurance, and you can't avoid taxes. So on this property is $155 in expense each and every month. That's going to come off the $725. Next up, I have a property management fee. I actually manage this property myself, but I have a separate property managing company that money goes into. So each and every month, $87 of that expense goes from the income there to my property managing company. Next up would be utilities. This is a single family home. The tenants pay for every single utility. I've yet to get a utility bill on this house ever since I owned it. So that's a big old goose egg. Next up is going to be repairs and maintenance. We just went over the laundry list of things that I've had to do. And because I had a furnace that I will ration out several different years, because I won't have to touch that furnace in several years. But I actually averaged out $40 every single month in repairs and maintenance. So the last expense is the debt service, or you may call the bank loan. It's made up of two key things. One is going to be the interest. This is the price that you pay to use leverage. This is your fee to pay the bank in order to use their money. Well, on this property, that fee is $172. Now, number two part of this is the principal pay down. Yes, I said principal pay down. This is an expense that you're paying, but is going towards the payoff of your property. So if you take all of that, you have $173 left after all of those expenses on this property. Now, some properties are going to vary higher, lower, have other expenses in there, but we're talking about just this property. So $173, if I calculate that out to the entire year, it's $2,076 for the year of my initial $13,000 investment. But wait a second. Remember I was talking about principal paydown? Well, principal paydown comes into effect right here because you can add that $98 to your $173 left, take that out to the year, and you end up with a 24% cash on cash return with this investment. 24%. Are you making 24%? If you're making 24% and you're not doing real estate, comment below, because I want to get in on that, and I want to get in on that now.
But I'm not done yet. Call right now and I'll triple the offer.
I don't know if it was working or not, but there is more. Remember I talked about I manage my own properties? Well, that expense is not going to a third party. That expense is still mine. It's just going to another one of my companies. So if you add that property managing expense that I took out, take that straight to the bottom line, I'm actually making 32% cash on cash return with this property.
That's better.
So even though this property is doing really well, what mistakes did I make? Let's touch on those now. And I really reflected on it and could come up with two key things that I felt like I could have done better right from the get-go before purchasing the property. Number one is I should have done my due diligence a little bit better. Remember I said the tenants are paying $725 and I haven't raised rent. Well, they were actually a little bit high on the rent, and I should have known that right from the get-go, but I didn't do proper due diligence. I didn't thoroughly look into the market and what the actual rent should be. On this one, I got lucky. It's performed very well for me, but I should have done that a little bit better, and I highly recommend that for you. Number two is I could have brought in a property inspector. On this property, I ended up walking it, inspecting it myself with the wholesaler, and I felt fairly confident at the time in that because the property was just recently renovated. It looked like it had been done well, so I felt confident in that. Now, if I had a property inspector, he or she may or may not have caught the issue with the boiler. If they did, at that point, it could have been a renegotiation with the seller at that point to cover all or some of that into the purchase price. So that's it. The two key things that I felt like I could have done better on this property. Now, I hope that my full explanation from soup to nuts on this was helping you in relieving some worry that you might have in getting into your very first rental property. If you like the video, smash that like button and subscribe down below. I'll see you in the next video. Did you hit that? Yeah? Hit the subscribe? I'm still here. Have a great day.